Hello everybody, I know it's been a long time since I've done one of these, but I'm back again with an old pen, in this case a very old pen. We have Steph from Grand Mia Pens to blame for this video, I think. I'll put a link to his channel in the comments, but he's very fond of his Parker 51s, and so I figured I needed to look and see what all the fuss was about. So this is a vintage Parker 51. It's in the standard black, as you might see there. I was not impatient enough or willing to spend the money to wait for, one of the fancy colors like the plum or etc. I did manage to snag a gold filled cap just by being lucky, I guess. I got it from eBay, as you might expect. The seller was a gentleman from Greece. The pen itself was made in England, so it's an English-made pen. It's undated, as far as I can tell anyway, which I would say makes it somewhere post 1952. It's a gold-filled cap. You got the standard Parker Arrow clip there. There is one slight cosmetic little ding there in the cap. One day I might get that, hammered out or whatever. But at the moment, that's its badge of honor, I guess, that it survived 50 odd years, because I guess this would have to be from the mid 50s. As I said, made in England. The cap design is probably going to be difficult to tell. Trying this lighting here, it's not showing up very well. You can just see at the top there, maybe the design. It's the vertical lines at the bottom that taper up into points at the top. It's kind of hard to see because the lines are pretty, it's pretty hard to see in person, to be honest. It's not, it's not like deeply engraved. The cap is smooth to the touch. You can't feel any texture where the lines are or anything. So it's a very shallow visual thing going on. Okay. It's a Parker 51, so that means the hood and nib. As you can see right there, there's very little nib sticking out. Let me see if I can focus this ever so slightly. Nope. Alright. But that's when you got a little bit of a nib sticking out. You can see a bit of feed right there at the back. It's hard to tell because it's a black feed in the middle of a black pen, but there is a feed there. You can just barely see it. The pen, for as you would expect from this date range, is the standard aerometric converter. Well, not a converter, but a filling system. It's epoxied in. It's not, a converter that you can remove and replace with a cartridge or anything. The typical sort of peaked cap at the end there. You can just barely see the peak. I'm trying to get it against the background. You can just barely see the little peak there. And I will try, but probably fail, to show you the engraving. My lining is not apparently up to the task here. But you can maybe just barely see that the Parker 51 is rolling past the glare there. In the filling instructions, on the rest of the surface there. This is certainly old enough to be, new enough to be a 4-squeeze pen is what it says. Now this sack, this is not sort of the clearish sack that the original has. This is, a solid black, whether it's full of ink or not. I did just fill it, so it is full right now, but it's pretty much always that black. I don't know whether that's original or whether that's a restored sack. I'm betting it's a restored sort of black neoprene kind of sack. But, I didn't ask the seller, and to be honest, I don't particularly care very much, because it works, and that's sort of the important thing. It came in working condition. I've not had to, break open the section to do anything crazy, which is good, because I don't know whether I'll be able to get it back together. Alright, so we're going to look at some writing here. This is a Parker 51, and speaking of old things, I've got a no longer available ink in there too, right? This is Swisher's Midnight Black. I've got about half a bottle left from, I don't even know, when I got it originally. But Swisher's has been out of business for quite some time, so I don't know. I mean, my understanding is that Noodler's made it for Swisher's. I don't know whether it went into their rotation as one of their black inks currently, or if it's, just has been ceased production. It appears to be a fairly fast-drying ink, although this is, just cheap craft paper. But even on sort of decent paper, it tends to dry pretty quickly. So, I don't know. I have not done any testing like whether it's permanent or not. Now, I did just fill it, so I'm going to get some I have found this pen to be somewhat temperamental in terms of if it's, the emptier the sac, the thinner the writing tends to be. But we'll try this out here. Fairly straightforward, writes really well. I have no complaints about that at all. Now this is a very interesting pen in that, this nib, right, there's no way this nib can flex in the sort of traditional sense, I don't think. I'm pretty sure I can't make those tines spread any just because they are so tiny and so buried inside the hood. But nevertheless, this is a very pressure sensitive pen. Right, if I start off with no pressure, I can make this write very thin. Sort of my normal pressure right now looks like that with the full ink. As the ink gets empty, this tends to look more like that. But if I put even just a little bit of pressure on there, I mean not very much pressure at all, then I can get quite a lot of ink coming out of it. I mean, this is not even as much pressure as you would need to write with, say, a ballpoint pen. And we're certainly not in the neighborhood of, a Noodler's Flex pen. We're not anywhere near that level of pushing. This is merely just being a little bit stern with it. You look hard, you just sort of look angrily at it, and you can get it to flex a little bit. Or not flex, but put out a lot more ink. So this is kind of weird to write with, because you can get quite a lot of different line widths. And if you're not careful, I don't tend to write with necessarily a very steady hand. You can see a little bit as I get sort of towards the end, that G didn't finish, and that's just because, I was getting a little light pressure, and so the pen just thinned out. Same with this Y. That Y is a lot thinner. The tail of that Y is a lot thinner, but that's just because in my normal writing thing, I don't put as much pressure on that upstroke as I do on the downstroke. And you really see that as you write with this pen to a lot greater extent than just about any pen I've ever used. I mean, I really have to think about it to write an F, where all the bits look the same. I often actually get a bit of an anti-stub effect, because normally with the stub you get a very thick downstroke and a very thin crosstroke. If I'm not paying a lot of attention with this pen, it'll go the other way. I'll get a very thin downstroke and a really thick crosstroke. I didn't quite, get that to happen that time, but it gives a very sort of interesting flavor to my writing. As I said, it gets more pronounced as the ink level drops. So if we sat there and went for a page or so, well, you might see more of it. Now, because of that, you can color in with no problems whatsoever. I mean, this is just no trouble at all to do that. And again, this is half of this is probably the ink and half of this is probably the paper. But even when I'm putting out a heck of a lot of ink like this, you can get very little smearing. I mean, it's dry almost right away. And again, some of that is probably the paper, some of that is the ink. But still, this is quite some fast drying ink we've got going on. Alright, so thank you to Steph for sort of getting me into this pen. I would not have even considered sort of really a vintage pen without watching his videos a lot. But this has been quite an interesting thing. And it probably would pay for me to practice a bit more with it to try and keep myself sort of more steady, or to use the little ups and downs and the pressures, on purpose instead of sort of on accident. But nevertheless, quite an interesting pen. So thanks for watching, and I hope to make another one of these soon.